The Karathi were a proud race, known for their ability to analyze and understand anything in the universe. Their scanning technology was unmatched, capable of mapping entire planets in seconds and breaking down the molecular structure of any material they encountered. They had studied black holes, neutron stars, and ancient artifacts left behind by civilizations long gone. Nothing had ever remained a mystery to them, until now. When the Karathi first encountered a human warship, they expected it to be like any other vessel: metal, engines, weapons, and shielding. A standard construct of any spacefaring species. Curious about how a lesser-known race like humanity had managed to build something so large, they initiated a deep scan. Their machines whirred to life, sending out waves of energy designed to map out the ship's structure down to the smallest bolt. At first, the readings came back normal: hull plating, weapon systems, power sources. But then the data stopped making sense. Numbers flickered, measurements fluctuated. The Karathi scanners, flawless for thousands of years, began to glitch. The shape of the ship twisted and blurred on their screens as if reality itself was shifting. The lead scientist, an elder named Valek, watched in confusion as the readings began to loop back on themselves. The warship was no longer just a machine. It was something else, something impossible. Then, one by one, the scanning machines shut down. Systems failed without reason. Lights flickered, and then the voices started. Faint at first, whispers running through the ship's speakers, speaking in a language the Karathi did not recognize. It wasn't an error. It wasn't interference. Something was speaking to them. The crew panicked, shutting down the scanners in a desperate attempt to stop whatever was happening. But it was too late. The ship's power flickered once, twice, and then complete darkness. Valek's last sight before the ship's systems collapsed was the warship outside, still floating in perfect silence, untouched, unchanged. The Karathi ship, however, would never leave that place again. The distress signal they sent was garbled, barely comprehensible when other ships received it. But one thing was clear. Before the message cut off, before their transmission fell to static, the last words spoken by Valek sent a chill through the entire fleet. The Karathi were not the only ones to learn the hard way. Far across the galaxy, in a sector filled with ancient ruins and abandoned outposts, the Solari, a race known for their ability to manipulate organic technology, heard whispers of the Karathi's failure. Intrigued by what they had learned, the Solari saw an opportunity. They had once been a peaceful species, dedicated to bioengineering and evolving their ships into living, breathing organisms. But the Karathi's report sparked something darker in them. Curiosity, the kind that often led to obsession, took root. Aboard the vessel Aurelia, a bioengineered dreadnought that pulsed with life as much as metal, Captain Valda, the Solari's most skilled leader, made the decision to find out what was inside a human warship. She wasn't one to shy away from challenges, especially one that had left the Karathi quaking in fear. If the Karathi couldn't solve the mystery, surely the Solari, masters of both technology and life itself, could. "Prepare the scanners," she ordered, her voice cold, calculating. "We will unlock the secrets of humanity, no matter the cost." Her crew moved quickly, working in a blur of efficiency as they activated the ship's living scanners, long, tendril-like appendages that extended from the vessel, reaching out to connect with the very fabric of space itself. As they approached a human warship, the TNS reckoning, Captain Valda could feel the tension in the air. Something wasn't right. The ship should have been like any other, but there was an uneasiness in the very presence of the Terran vessel. She pushed the feeling aside. The scan began. At first, everything seemed fine. The sensors detected the standard components, a massive hull, heavy weapons, and the unmistakable energy signature of a human ship. But the further the scanners delved, the more erratic the readings became. Energy waves oscillated wildly, and the tendrils of organic material used to scan began to wither, curling back into the Aurelia's hull, shriveling as though something invisible was draining the life from them. Captain Valda, watching the data stream with narrowed eyes, leaned forward. Something was wrong. The TNS reckoning should not have been able to cause this kind of interference. "What's happening?" she demanded. Her chief scientist, Dr. Zalara, appeared at her side, pale and trembling. "The readings, they don't match anything we've ever seen. The ship, it's not just a vessel, it's something else." Before she could respond, the ship's systems began to flicker. One by one, every light in the control room began to dim. The ship's life support systems started to fail, and a low hum filled the air. It wasn't coming from the human warship, it was coming from the vessel Aurelia itself. "Shut it down!" Valda commanded. But it was too late. The voice came next, low and deep, reverberating in their minds, not through the speakers. Every crew member froze as the voice seeped into their consciousness. "You should not have looked." Valda's hand hovered over the controls, but her fingers refused to obey. It was as if the ship itself was rebelling, rejecting the orders of its captain. The crew began to collapse in agony, clutching their heads, their bodies convulsing in uncontrollable spasms. Dr. Zalara screamed, her face contorted in horror, but her voice was drowned out by the cacophony that filled the room, a sound like metal grinding against metal, like a great beast stirring in the depths of the ship. It wasn't until the lights went out completely and the ship's organic systems shut down entirely that the whispers stopped. Silence followed, thick and suffocating. The TNS reckoning drifted in space, motionless and undisturbed. The vessel Aurelia, however, was not the same. When the rescue ships arrived to collect the wreckage of the salary ship, they found only a few survivors, Captain Valda among them. She had barely managed to escape, her mind shattered by whatever had happened aboard the Aurelia. When she was brought aboard a rescue vessel, her once commanding presence was gone, replaced by a look of pure terror. "What did you see?" one of the officers asked, his voice trembling as he stood before her. Captain Valda looked at him with empty eyes, her lips trembling as she whispered, "The ship. It wasn't just a ship. It was waiting. And now we've woken it." Her words hung in the air like a cold, unshakable truth. And the galaxy, already beginning to fear human warships, would soon come to understand the horror they had unleashed. The silence that followed Captain Valda's cryptic warning hung over the rescue fleet like a dark cloud. Her crew, now broken and terrified, was quarantined aboard the nearest medical station. They were told to rest, recover, and forget what had happened. But deep down, everyone knew that Valda had spoken the truth. Whatever was inside those human warships was not meant to be known. Back at the Galactic Concord, where the ruling council of the galaxy's most powerful species gathered, the situation was growing more urgent. The Karathi, Solari, and now the once proud Var were all reluctant to speak of their failures, but the fear they shared was undeniable. The Concord had always prided itself on its ability to control knowledge, on its dominance over the cosmos. But now it was facing a force it could neither understand nor defeat. The Council was in an uproar. Debates raged about what to do with the growing number of reports from alien fleets, each one detailing the same chilling encounters with the human warships. The Galactic Concord, the most powerful and secretive faction in the galaxy, had made their decree clear. No species should attempt to scan or engage with a human warship ever again. But the whispers, the rumors, were spreading. Not every race obeyed the decree. Some still dared to find out what lay within those ships. Among those who still defied the warning were the Zelnari. This race of ancient, nearly immortal beings had mastered the art of bending space and time, controlling the very fabric of reality itself. Their minds worked on a higher plane of existence than any other species in the galaxy. They could see the threads of destiny, weave events as if they were mere pieces on a chessboard. For centuries, the Zelnari had viewed the rest of the galaxy as children, beings to be watched, analyzed, and manipulated. They saw themselves as above the squabbles of lesser species. But when they heard the whispers about human warships, a flicker of curiosity ignited within them. Lord Nyx, the most powerful of the Zelnari, gathered his council. His body, a shimmering mass of shifting light, flickered as he spoke. The Concord fears these ships. That means there is something inside them, something that even the most powerful beings in the galaxy cannot comprehend. And that is something we must understand. His second-in-command, Asteriel, raised an eyebrow. But the warnings? The failures? The others were destroyed. Is it worth risking everything? Lord Nyx smiled, a cold, knowing smile. What is knowledge if not a challenge? The greatest minds in the galaxy should not bow before fear. We will scan a human warship and learn its secrets, no matter what it takes. With this decision made, the Zelnari launched their most ambitious plan to date. The Zelnari ship, Arcanus, a vessel larger than any other in the galaxy, was prepared for the mission. It was equipped with technology so advanced that it could not only scan the very heart of the human ships, but also manipulate the information it collected. A perfect vessel for the task. Asteriel and Nyx stood together at the helm as the Arcanus approached the TNS Ascendant, a massive human warship patrolling the borders of Terran-controlled space. The Arcanus came within range, its massive scanning arrays extending outward. The Zelnari knew the risks. They had been warned by the Concord, by the Karathi, and by the Solari, but their desire to unlock the secrets of the human warships drove them forward. The scanning process began. At first, the results were as expected. The TNS Ascendant registered as a powerful warship, its systems active, its weapons primed for battle. But then, as the Zelnari delved deeper, something began to change. The data began to shift. The readings that had seemed stable a moment ago began to flicker again, just like the Karathi ship, just like the Solaris. A low hum filled the Arcanus's control room. At first it was faint, but quickly grew louder, almost as if the sound was coming from within the ship itself. "Shut it down," Asteriel barked, her voice cold, but there was no response. The ship was no longer responding to their commands. It was as if the TNS Ascendant had locked them out, had turned its attention fully upon them. The lights dimmed. The hum grew into a roar. "Why isn't it stopping?" Nyx demanded, eyes wide as the scanners went dark. He attempted to override the system, but his hand froze mid-air. Something in the room had changed. Then a voice, deep and resonant, filled their minds. Not a sound, but a presence, something ancient and far older than any being in the galaxy. "You have looked too deep." It wasn't just a warning, it was a command, a force so powerful it bent the very fabric of reality. The Arcanus began to shake, the once stable hull now warping under an unseen pressure. The crew tried to shut down the systems, but the ship was moving on its own. Asteriel could feel it now, the presence inside the human warship, watching them. It wasn't just the ship anymore. It was something more. The Arcanus began to flicker out of existence. One moment it was there, in full view. The next it was gone, replaced by a feeling of deep emptiness, as if the ship itself had ceased to be. In the quiet that followed, a single message appeared on the control panel. The text flickered before Nyx's eyes, slowly forming into a single line. "You have seen too much." And then everything went dark. When the Zelnari ship Arcanus disappeared into the void, leaving nothing but empty space in its wake, the news spread like wildfire. The Galactic Concord had always prided itself on its supremacy, its ability to tame the cosmos and uncover its deepest secrets. But now even they could not deny that something had changed. The human warships were no longer just machines. They were forces of nature, and every attempt to understand them only led to destruction and madness. The Concord, in its desperation to control the narrative, called for an emergency meeting of the ruling council. Lord Kresh, the head of the Karathi delegation, was the first to speak. His once proud demeanor was now replaced with a grim, weary look. The Karathi had tried to scan human warships and failed spectacularly. The Solari had tried and met the same fate. Now, even the mighty Zelnari had fallen, vanishing without a trace. There was something in the human warships that even the most advanced species in the galaxy could not comprehend. "We must stop," Kresh said, his voice heavy. "Whatever it is inside those ships, it is not meant to be understood. We have crossed a line we should not have. If we continue, we risk more than just our fleets. We risk the very fabric of reality itself." But there were those in the council who refused to accept this. Lady Jara, a powerful and ambitious leader from the Trellis, a race of cold-blooded conquerors, stood up, her sharp eyes glinting with defiance. "You speak of fear, Lord Kresh, but what do we fear? A ship? A weapon? Number. It is knowledge that we fear, and I will not stand by and let these Terrans have power over us simply because they have hidden something we cannot see." Jara's words rang through the council hall, causing murmurs of agreement from certain factions. The Trellis, with their long history of conquest and expansion, had never backed down from a challenge. If anything, they were more determined than ever to unlock the secrets that had caused such fear in others. "Knowledge is the key to power," Lady Jara continued. "We will find out what is inside the human warships. We will break their defenses and learn what they are hiding." Lord Kresh's expression hardened. "And what will you do when you're staring into the abyss, Lady Jara? Will you still claim to understand what's inside those ships when you're lost to it, like the Karathi, the Solari, and the Zelnari?" The room fell silent, and for a moment the tension between the factions was palpable. It was clear that the Concord was split. Some, like Kresh, wanted to abandon the search, to leave the human warships alone. Others, like Jara, believed that nothing should remain out of their grasp. Knowledge had always been the ultimate prize. In the shadows of the council hall, a lone figure watched the debate unfold. Vaya, a human historian who had long kept herself hidden from the prying eyes of the Galactic Concord, had been listening carefully. For years she had suspected that humanity's past held secrets no one was meant to uncover. Her people, in their desperate struggle for survival, had locked away a horrible truth. She knew it had to do with the warships, but she had never dared to discover what lay beneath the metal and machinery. But now, after hearing the stories of the Karathi, the Solari, and the Zelnari, Vaya was certain of one thing: whatever humanity had hidden in those ships had been buried for a reason. And now others had begun to stir it. She had always believed that the warships were just vessels, machines created for defense. But now she knew that something else had been locked away inside them, something far more dangerous than anyone could imagine. Her heart raced as she realized what must be done. If she could find the truth behind the warships, if she could uncover what humanity had buried, maybe she could stop this madness before it consumed the entire galaxy. Vaya's path was clear. She would have to venture into the deepest corners of human-controlled space, places even the Galactic Concord dared not enter. Only there, among the forgotten ruins and abandoned stations, would she be able to discover the truth. But she knew the risks. If she was caught by the conquered, if they learned of her plan, she would be silenced, just like all those who had tried to uncover the secrets of human warships before her. Meanwhile, far from the council chambers on the fringes of the galaxy, a new force was gathering. The DLC, a species of archivists and truth-seekers, had been following the unfolding events closely. Unlike the conquered, they didn't seek to dominate or control the galaxy. They only wanted to understand the mysteries of the universe, to unlock the ancient puzzles that had been hidden away for millennia. The Seeker's Gift, their most advanced scout ship, had been watching human fleets for months, recording their movements, trying to decipher their energy signatures, and piecing together the patterns of their behavior. They had learned many things about humanity, but the warships still eluded their understanding. Now the DLC was making one final desperate attempt to uncover the truth. Captain Kethril, the leader of the Seeker's Gift, stared out at the stars, his mind filled with uncertainty. The mission was simple enough. Follow a Terran fleet, gather intelligence, and report back. But the closer they got, the more he felt the sense of foreboding that had been growing in him ever since they started observing the Terran ships. "What will we find out there, Captain?" one of his crew members asked, her voice filled with doubt. Kethril didn't respond immediately. His eyes were fixed on the distant human ships, the way they moved so methodically, so calmly, as if they knew exactly where they were going. It was unsettling. "We will find answers," Kethril said finally, though even he wasn't sure what those answers would be. As the Seeker's Gift approached the edge of Terran-controlled space, the crew grew increasingly uneasy. Captain Kethril had ordered them to maintain radio silence, not wanting to provoke any attention from the human ships. The last thing they needed was to be detected. His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden, sharp flicker on the radar. "Captain, we're picking up a TNS fleet," said Lieutenant Arax, one of the most skilled navigators aboard the ship. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge of tension. "There's a large flagship. It's the TNS Omen, sir." Kethril's eyes narrowed. The TNS Omen was a legend among human fleets, a ship that had been spotted across the galaxy but never engaged in direct conflict. It was said to be untouchable, its movements unpredictable. For years the galaxy had whispered about the Omen, but few had ever dared to approach it. "Where is it headed?" Kethril asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Arax's fingers flew over her console. "It's not moving. The fleet continues on its course, but the Omen has come to a stop." The silence on the ship was palpable. Every crew member, without even being told, knew what this meant. It meant they had been noticed. Kethril stood up, his mind racing. The Omen was a symbol. It represented something beyond just a ship. It was a warning. The Terrans didn't engage, didn't speak, didn't fight unless they wanted to. And now it seemed like the Omen was watching them, waiting for something. He turned to Arax. "Activate passive sensors. We'll scan it, but we need to be careful. We don't provoke it." Arax hesitated, but only for a moment. "Understood, Captain." She input the command, and the ship's sensors began to reach out, carefully probing the Omen's energy signature from a distance. At first, everything seemed normal. The ship registered like any other, a mass of energy, a hull made of advanced materials, weapon systems powered but idle. But then something unexpected happened. The data began to distort. The readings from the Seeker's Gift scanners fluctuated wildly, just like the reports from the Karathi and the Solari before them. The Omen's energy signature began to shift, almost as if it were moving in and out of existence. "Shut it down!" Kethril barked, his voice growing frantic. The Omen wasn't just a ship, it was something alive, something that shouldn't have been. But the order came too late. Before they could disengage the scan, the TNS Omen did something no one expected. It flickered. One moment, it was there, solid and real. The next, it was gone, replaced by a presence, a feeling so heavy, so suffocating, that even the ship's artificial gravity seemed to warp. The crew of the Seeker's Gift staggered, clutching their consoles, trying to steady themselves. In the control room, the lights flickered, and the ship seemed to vibrate as if it were shaking in a storm that only it could feel. And then the voices began. Not through the ship's communication systems, not over any speaker. The voices, or the presence, was inside their minds. The crew members began to scream, clutching their heads as if their very thoughts were being torn apart. "You have found us." The voice was calm but ancient, echoing inside their minds like a thunderous whisper. It wasn't a language they could understand, but the meaning was clear. They were no longer in control. The ship, the Omen, was alive, and it was watching them. Kethril struggled to stay conscious. His vision blurred. The room spun. The voice in his head grew louder. He could feel the weight of it pressing down on him, like a force trying to suffocate him from the inside. "Do you want to know what lies within?" The question was more than words. It was an invitation, one that came with an undeniable dread. Something ancient and terrible was waiting in the depths of the human warships, something that should have been forgotten. With a final, desperate attempt, Kethril ordered, "Emergency shutdown! Now!" The Seeker's Gift lurched as the systems cut out, but the voice didn't stop. The presence inside their minds grew stronger, pushing through their defenses. The crew was helpless. The ship was shaking violently, as though it were being pulled apart. "You should not have looked. You have already seen too much." The last words were not spoken. They were felt deep in their very souls. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the presence disappeared, leaving the ship in eerie silence. The lights returned. The systems came back online. But the damage had been done. The crew of the Seeker's Gift was broken, their minds shattered. Captain Kethril staggered to his feet, his body trembling as he tried to process what had just happened. The Omen was still out there, waiting, watching. And the galaxy had just learned something no one was meant to understand. The Seeker's Gift drifted aimlessly at first as its crew recovered from the terrifying encounter with the TNS Omen. Captain Kethril remained in his quarters, his hands trembling as he stared at the blank data screens. His mind was clouded, the images of that deep, ancient presence still fresh in his thoughts. He had ordered the scan, but now he wasn't sure if he had survived or if he was still trapped in the same nightmare. Outside the ship, the Omen continued to sit motionless in the void, as if waiting for something or someone to make the next move. "Captain, we've received a message," Lieutenant Arax's voice echoed through the stillness of Kethril's cabin. Her tone was cautious, but there was an urgency to it that he couldn't ignore. He stood slowly, his body heavy with exhaustion, and moved toward the comms console. "What is it?" he asked, his voice sounding strange even to his own ears. Arax's eyes met his over the comms screen. "It's a distress signal, Captain, but it's not from any of the known channels. It's human. It's coming from the TNS Revenant." The TNS Revenant, a name he had heard many times, but never seen in person. The Revenant was a warship, but it was different from the others. It had appeared in multiple systems, its movements erratic and unpredictable. It was said to be haunted, and rumors swirled that the crew was never fully in control of the ship. No one knew why. No one knew what happened to its crew. But the distress signal was clear. It was a call for help. "What's the signal say?" Kethril asked, his voice suddenly sharp. Arax hesitated. It's strange, Captain. It's not just a message. It's a warning." Kethril's heart skipped a beat. "A warning?" Arax nodded, her face pale. "The message, it's the same as the distress signal we received before. It says, 'The ship is looking at us.'" As Kethril absorbed the chilling words, the events of the last few hours came crashing down upon him. The presence, the whispers in his mind, the omen, it was all connected. And now the Revenant, another human warship, was sending a similar warning. Something had been awakened. Something was moving across the galaxy, and it was inside the human ships. He turned back to Arax. "Prepare the crew. We're heading to the Revenant. We're going to find out what's really happening." Arax looked at him, her face full of concern. "Captain, are you sure? We don't know what we're dealing with. We don't know what's happening to these ships, but—" "I know," Kethril interrupted, his voice heavy with resolve. "But if we don't find out now, we'll never get the chance. We've already seen too much to turn back. We can't ignore this. If we don't stop it, no one will." The Seeker's Gift shifted direction, its engines humming as it began its journey toward the last known position of the TNS Revenant. The crew, once filled with purpose and excitement, now moved with an air of reluctance, their faces drawn and pale. No one spoke much during the voyage. They all knew that what they were about to face might be more than any of them could survive. The omen had already shown them a glimpse of the impossible. The Revenant could very well hold the next piece of the puzzle. But was it a puzzle they wanted to solve? Kethril didn't know. But as the distance between the Seeker's Gift and the Revenant shrank, a strange, unshakable feeling filled the ship. A presence. It was subtle at first, like a flicker in the corner of their minds. A coldness creeping into the air. The temperature in the control room began to drop, and soon the crew could see their breath as they spoke. Arax turned to Kethril. "Captain, do you feel that? It's like something is pulling us toward it." Kethril nodded grimly, his mind racing. "We're getting close. Too close." They entered the coordinates, and there it was, the TNS Revenant, drifting in the blackness, its exterior battered but still intact. It wasn't moving. It was just waiting. "Prepare for docking," Kethril ordered. "We don't know what we'll find, but we need to approach this carefully." The Seeker's Gift moved closer, its docking bay doors opening to allow the shuttle to approach. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Every crew member was aware that this mission might be their last, but none dared to speak of it. As the shuttle landed softly on the Revenant's hull, Kethril took one last look at his crew. "Stay alert. Remember, we are here to gather information, not to engage. If we don't return, no one else can make the same mistake." They disembarked, moving cautiously into the silent corridors of the Revenant. The interior was eerily quiet, and the lights flickered as if struggling to stay alive. The air smelled faintly of dust, and the silence weighed heavily on them. It felt as if the ship had been dead for years, yet it was still alive, still watching. The crew advanced through the ship, moving past empty rooms, broken consoles, and signs of a battle that had taken place long ago. But there was no trace of any survivors. The ship was abandoned. "Where is everyone?" Lieutenant Arax whispered, her voice barely audible. Kethril motioned for silence. "Stay close. Whatever happened here, we don't want to be caught in the middle of it." As they moved deeper into the Revenant, the presence that had been lurking in the back of their minds began to manifest. The air grew thick, and the walls seemed to close in around them. The very fabric of reality felt like it was warping. And then they heard it, the faintest of whispers, carried on the wind, curling through the empty hallways. "You were warned!" The whispers were getting louder. The crew was no longer sure if they were hearing it through their comms or in their heads. Something was changing in the ship. Something was waking up. They didn't know what it was, but they knew they had to leave before it found them. But it was already too late. The whispers grew louder, swirling around them like a tangible force. It was no longer just the faint hum in the background. It was now an overwhelming presence, filling every corner of the TNS Revenant. The crew stumbled through the halls, their minds unraveling with each step they took. Kethril, though resolute, could feel his grip on reality beginning to slip. The walls seemed to breathe, and the very air felt heavy, as though something was pulling at their thoughts, at their very souls. "Captain, we need to leave," Arax gasped, her voice quivering. Her eyes were wide with terror. "It's here. It's watching us." Kethril didn't need to look back to know she was right. He could feel it too. They were no longer the hunters. They were the prey. The ship wasn't just alive. It was aware. It was awake, and it knew they were here. The ship had been waiting for them just as it had for all the others. Suddenly, the ground shook beneath them. The entire ship seemed to groan, as though the Revenant itself was coming to life. The lights flickered, and the hum of the ship's engines roared to life, louder than before. Something was moving inside, something ancient, terrible, and alive. "We have to get out of here now!" Kethril shouted, his voice breaking through the chaos. But as he turned to lead the crew back to the shuttle bay, the walls seemed to close in on them. The corridors twisted, the path ahead no longer straight. It was as though the ship itself was playing tricks on their senses, distorting reality. The whispers became clearer now, and Kethril's heart pounded in his chest as the voice echoed in his mind once more. "You have seen too much. Now you will never leave." The ground trembled again, and Kethril heard something growling from deep within the ship. It wasn't a machine, not a creature. They couldn't describe it. It was more like a force, something that couldn't be seen, but could certainly be felt. "Captain!" Arax cried out. "It's in the ship. It's in our heads." She grabbed Kethril's arm, pulling him toward the exit. "We can't outrun it. We have to leave now." They ran, but with every step they took, the path twisted further. No matter how hard they tried to escape, the walls closed in. The whispers were deafening now, their voices echoing inside Kethril's skull. He could no longer tell where the ship ended and he began. And then, as the crew reached what they thought was the shuttle bay, they saw it. The TNS Revenant was no longer just a warship. It had changed. The ship's once metal hull had shifted, its walls now pulsing with a sickly glow. What had once been a ship of war now looked like something much worse, a prison, a tomb. There, in the middle of the bay, something moved, a shape barely visible in the dark. It was massive, its form a collection of dark, twisted shapes that defied logic. Kethril's breath caught in his throat. The Revenant wasn't just a ship, it was a cage, and inside something stirred. "Get out!" Kethril screamed, but it was too late. The creature, or thing, had already noticed them. The ship's lights flickered one final time, and the crew felt themselves drawn toward the center of the bay. Their bodies froze as a cold, dark force poured out from the walls, from the floors, from the very core of the Revenant. It was as though the ship itself had awakened, and now it was hungry. In the final moments, Kethril saw what had been hidden all along, what humanity had buried within their warships. The ships were not designed for war. They were designed to contain. Contain what? Kethril's mind couldn't grasp it. It was beyond comprehension, beyond anything the galaxy had ever known. And as the force reached out to consume them all, the last thing Kethril heard was the same voice, the one that had haunted them all. "You were warned." The Seeker's gift, the Revenant and its crew, none of them would be found. They would disappear into the void, lost to whatever it was that had slumbered within the human warships. And somewhere, deep in the heart of human space, the TNS Omen still waited, its cold hull drifting silently in the dark. Watching, waiting, because whatever lay within those ships was never meant to be uncovered.